This is Cumberland Viewpoint. It's brought to you in part by the Putnam County Family YMCA, and it is a community service of Cookeville Communications. I'm Dave Johnson, continuing our discussion today with Pat Ryan, the president of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. And if you've just tuned in, he is also the president and founder of Ryan & Associates, an editorial consulting firm based in Cookeville, Tennessee, specializing in online global affairs information resources. He travels the world, engages with officials around the planet, and you have a website that many people use as a resource for information, particularly about Middle Eastern affairs, political and otherwise, and you're quite the expert on Saudi Arabia, and you spent a lot of time there.
Thanks, Dave. Great to be here as always. I appreciate the invitation. Yes, we do focus mostly on the Middle East. I first went to the Gulf in '73. I hate to sound that old, but I was a very young sailor when I arrived in the Middle East, and it seems my career in the Navy, especially after I got commissioned and became an intelligence officer, has touched on Middle Eastern affairs, and since I retired in '98, I've been involved in developing a business that focuses on Middle East affairs and writing about them.
26 years altogether in the Navy, and now many years since, 16 years, and developing, you call it a business, you're a journalist, and you do a lot of writing, and I know you spend a great deal of your time writing and editing, and also editing other people's writing. You have other people who are providing information for you, and then you put it up on the website, and a lot of officials around the world utilize your website as a way to understand what's going on.
Well, we have a number of sites. The one you mentioned about Saudi Arabia is called SUSRIS, SUSRIS.com, the Saudi-U.S. Relations Project. And that provides, it's sort of oriented towards specialists, but we get a lot of people who don't know much about the Saudi-U.S. relationship who visit. There's a newsletter that's free to anyone who wants to get the newsletter, and we publish articles, interviews, special reports, daily news reviews, those kinds of things. But we also have projects dealing with Qatar and the whole Gulf, Arabia Link. So we stay busy keeping up with what's going on there. And there never seems to be a day goes by where there isn't something to write about.
I kind of generalize what you do as stomping out a lot of ignorance, but there are a lot of people out there who need the information that you have, and the perspective and the knowledge is what helps people understand to solve problems. And there does seem to be a great deal of, ignorance sounds harsh, but I don't mean stupid. I mean a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge of facts, of data that is necessary to accurately and successfully process information for the best outcomes. And I think we were discussing before the break, this Pew Research study that came out that says that the public, and I assume that's the American public,
right,
sees U.S. power declining. And you have some interesting statistics that seem to be counterintuitive to me, but share those with me.
The Pew Center does these periodic surveys, and they've done them since 1964. They have data that far back that they've charted out in a recent study, and it's kind of interesting. The lead story that they published on was the views of Americans on U.S. power in the world. And it appears that most Americans, if you look at the survey results, it's a 40-year low in the Americans' appraisal of U.S. global power. We now have 53% of the American public think that we're less important and powerful than 10 years ago, and 17% thinking that we're more important and powerful. And over the last 40 years or so, the numbers were in the range of 35 to 40%. Thought we were less important and powerful, and the reverse, more important and powerful. So it's sort of striking that we're now at 53% in the last few years. So the American public is concerned about America's role in the world. And another question that they asked was, basically, should the U.S. mind its own business abroad? And a very high number, a majority, 52%, believe that America should mind their own business in the world.
Is that how they phrase that question? Is that are you paraphrasing that, or is that?
Well, the study says
the
the percentage agreeing that, quote, the U.S. should mind its own business internationally and let other countries get along the best that they can on their own, unquote. So,
so they use that phrase, mind your own business.
Right. And let people take care of themselves.
And I'm always interested in the phrasing of these questions in these surveys. The one that asks about how the level of our importance in the world, and the word important is a relative term, and I'd be interested in knowing what their criteria are for determining importance. What standards?
Well, I think it's in the eye of the
exactly.
the beholder.
How would you list those? What would you say is what are the top, say, 5 or 10 standards that we should use to measure our importance in the world?
Clearly, if you look at America's standing in the world as its political leadership, there's not a part of the world where the United States is not heavily involved in diplomatic, economic, trade and commerce, military partnerships. I can't think of another nation on the planet that has as widespread a role as America does. I think probably the reflection of America is not as important as it was. May also have something to do with minding its own business, and people are fatigued with. We've had an extremely active role in the world since 9/11. 2 wars that seem to be interminable, a lot of American blood and treasure spent on what some people see as questionable results, especially in the case of Iraq, and now we're looking at leaving Afghanistan, and the outcome there is far from certain to be positive.
So when we are trying to determine our level of importance in the world, this naturally dovetails into this attitude about minding our own business. Where do you draw the line between what is our business and what isn't our business? Because we are so intertwined with so many factors of world politics, particularly world economy. If something happens in Japan and it affects our markets. Something happens in our markets, it affects the European markets. The whole planet is intertwined. So how do you determine, and where do people draw the line between what is our business, quote unquote, and what is not?
Well, I think there really has not been a change in America's strategic interests that correlates to these results. This is the American public's perception,
right?
And
which can translate into political choices.
Oh, of course, yeah. Look at the situation now in Africa. We have this recent disastrous situation in Nigeria where several hundred schoolgirls were taking, and everyone is clamoring for somebody to do something. The Nigerian government seems to be treading water, not wanting to be aggressive enough to resolve the problem, and the Americans are being asked to go in, and everybody always says do something, and we don't always know what the something is, because once you do it, then the American public can sometimes be fickle and say, well, we didn't want you to do that, but it's difficult for decision makers to do the right thing. So I think it's important for the American public to be interested and engaged with what's going on in the world, and that's what we try to do at the Tennessee World Affairs Council, is to help our communities understand some of these issues and debates, to talk to decision makers. We bring ambassadors from foreign countries to our community, and programs and resources to help people understand. But it's an uphill battle, really, frankly, and honestly, to get people interested in what America's interests abroad are. And it was interesting in the Pew study, although 53% of the Americans surveyed felt that we should mind our own business, 2/3, 66% exactly, said that it's that international, the American involvement in the global economic community is an important thing to America. So there you have the flip side. We should mind our own business, but the business of America is business, and as far as the global economy is concerned, Americans want us to be engaged in business.
2/3, you said,
Right.
which would be 66% or so. Say we should be more involved, but
And just
at
20,
the same time, 52% are saying we should mind our business, or that we're and that our power is declining.
right. So it's difficult.
How do you reconcile those numbers?
I don't think you can, except if you look at the mind your own business. I think people are more focused on the military conflicts and involvement that involves sending troops abroad and getting involved in people's affairs. They don't mind doing business with a country, but some Americans clearly are concerned. We've seen these cycles over the years. American isolationism didn't just get created in the last 5 years.
Pat Ryan is our guest today on Cumberland Viewpoint, and a returning guest, a regular president of the Tennessee World Affairs Council, and also would like for you to go online and vote for the Tennessee World Affairs Council to gain the grant money that's available from First Tennessee Bank Foundation. All you have to do is go to 150daysofgiving.com and vote for the Tennessee World Affairs Council. You can do it every day and you can do it once per device every day, and you'll make it more likely that they will get the grant money that will enable them to continue their efforts to educate this area and elsewhere about world affairs. And I'll repeat that again at the end of the show here, 150daysofgiving.com. That's the number 150daysofgiving.com. If you're on your computer, you have it handy. If you've got your iPhone in your pocket or any other smart device, just go online there and vote for the Tennessee World Affairs Council. It's a grant opportunity given by the First Tennessee Bank Foundation. Now,
thanks for the plug, Dave. We appreciate that, and we appreciate First Tennessee Bank Foundation for their generosity to the nonprofit community.
Now, I'm curious what your perception is. How accurate is the Pew study that says that the U.S. power is declining? Is that number that they came up with, would that be consistent with your opinion? And what would be your attitude about minding our business?
Well, I don't question their methodology and their results. I'm sure that their numbers reflect very accurately the perception among
52%
Americans.
said, and I believe if I'm
right,
not mistaken,
52% America should mind its own business.
Right.
And in terms of the question about
power
America,
declining.
global power is now at a 40-year low. 53% say that America is now less important and powerful than it was 10 years ago.
And how would you chime in on that?
Well, if you look at all of the components of power, America is still untouchable by the nearest rival. In terms of military power, we spend as much as the next 8 or 9, depending on what day of the week.
I've seen more numbers. I've seen more countries.
So we
14.
certainly have military power that is unequaled by the nearest rival. We have economic power. We're the #1 economy in the world. China is moving fast in that direction. But if you look at the fact that they have 1.3 billion people, the per capita gross domestic product is less than Portugal. They may, as a country, have a increasing share of the global GDP, but the United States still is an economic powerhouse. So I discount the results of this poll, this survey, in terms of whether it is accurate or not. It's a reflection of the feeling of Americans about where they see the country currently.
You disagree with the perceptions of the people who say that, the 52% who say that
Yes,
our power is declining.
I would fall in the minority on the survey, but I think by any realistic measure, the United States is, you could press the point that maybe we are not as important as we were 10 years ago, but we are still probably, not probably, without a doubt, the most important country on the planet. No international crisis seems to be able to be tackled without the United States leadership. No economic activity around the world is not touched in some way by the American economy. No military crisis is not attended to without our partners around the world in Asia, Africa, Europe. Wherever there are problems, the Middle East, people look to the United States leadership.
Now, we obviously control this role. We have that power and that influence on a planetary scale, and then you've got people saying we should mind our own business. So, do you think that in order to maintain that power, that we can't just mind our own business? That goes along with that role and that the responsibility of having that global power, being number one.
Well, I think people may not understand completely what America's role in the world is, and this is not only confined to the realm of military power, where we've clearly seen in the last decade America flex its military might after 9/11, but our role principally in the economic sphere, and that's reflected in some way to an understanding that international economics, the global economy is important to us. But if you look historically at the trends, these things run in cycles. Whenever America has been involved, engaged heavily in international military conflicts, whether it's World War I, World War II, the Vietnam conflict, there's a post-conflict period where Americans think that we've spent too much attention, too much blood and treasure, that we need to turn our attention to domestic issues. So that's not atypical of the historical cycle. But I think if you look in the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years, America and the world have developed into a more intertwined global economy. There's not much that happens in the world that doesn't influence events somewhere else in the world. So to bring our attention back exclusively to domestic issues at the expense of international engagement is a worrisome trend. And you can see this in the opinion polls about foreign aid. It's less than 1% of the federal budget, and these go to things that are in America's interest. We're a benevolent society, and we try to help people out, and that's what a lot of the component of international aid is. But in its purest form, international aid is in America's interest.
And I also know that many politicians, people in powerful positions and on subcommittees and committees in Congress who make big decisions regarding American policy, particularly foreign policy, they would see this study by the Pew Research Council, and it's a very credible organization, highly reputable surveyor of public opinion. And so I can see a politician seeing this stat, 52% of people think we should, quote, mind our own business, and see that as an immediate talking point, and that they would incorporate into their daily, if not weekly, monthly talking points as they travel around the country. They perhaps are in a re-election mode and campaigning mode, and they see that as an excellent opportunity to gain a majority of opinion on their side by pandering to that perception that we should mind our own business, and also the other one that says that we're declining in our world power, and see that as an opportunity, and to work that into their political messaging on a daily basis, perhaps, and then also in policy. And then you see how that all comes out in a situation like Benghazi, and how certain people are really kicking that dead horse. It's been investigated 12 or 13 times now, I think, officially. They've gone through this cycle over and over, and they just won't let it go. Do you see that cycle sort of playing out that way?
Yeah, I don't think you can ever separate international affairs and U.S. foreign policy from politics. And things in Washington, as we all have seen, have become more partisan in the last few years. the last decade, and people will seize upon public sentiment for their own political purposes. But that's nothing new. People have been demagoguing international affairs and this or that event throughout history. But it is dismaying to me to see what's going on with Benghazi, because it just what's going on in Washington currently is clearly outsized the significance of what really happened in Benghazi.
Well, it's no coincidence that the Secretary of State at the time was Hillary Clinton, and that it's widely believed that she is going to run for president in 2016. And given the fact that she was Secretary of State, the diplomatic services in Benghazi that were under attack would fall under her purview, and therefore the blame could be placed on her eventually for what happened there, Americans dying, and the attack being a big disaster for the United States, but by no means anywhere near the biggest diplomatic attack on American diplomacy around the world. I mean, we've had people being attacked for many, many years, and nothing near the scrutiny that this one has received.
Right. I'm not about to get into the partisan politics of it, because I would prefer that it not be used as a political toy in the 2016 elections, or even currently with the atmosphere on Capitol Hill. But clearly, if you look historically at the catastrophes and the tragedies that have befallen Americans abroad, whether diplomats, the military, the Beirut bombing of the Marine barracks, for example.
9/11.
9/11, to be sure.
Under President Bush's watch.
Yeah, it's not just Democrats or Republicans. There have been tragedies that have befallen Americans over time, and I would prefer personally to see less public partisanship in dealing with looking into these events. They all deserve the scrutiny that they get in the investigations that are launched. For example, there was an investigation conducted by the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff about the Benghazi incident and the tragedy that cost Americans 4 American lives there. And these investigations contribute to steps that are taken that hopefully prevent similar things from happening in the future.
Pat Ryan's our guest today here on Cumberland Viewpoint, and he is the president of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. Let's move around the world here a little bit.
Okay.
China. What's going on with China right now? What is our current status?
It's very interesting to watch what's happening in China, because we mentioned that they're moving up the economic ladder in terms of their global economic power. They're increasing their military power. They're sort of flexing their muscles in East Asia. There's currently a lot of tension between China and Japan over some islands in the Western Pacific. President Obama was recently in Tokyo, where he made a statement saying that the Japan-U.S. Mutual Defense Pact included protection of the Japanese interests in these islands, which riled the Chinese. So we have relations with China that are multi-tracked, economic, political, military, to be sure, and not always in a good way as far as military, and the economic and political go up and down. But I think Americans should be taking a very good look at what's happening with U.S.-Chinese relations, because they've, in just a very short span in terms of the reach of history, have emerged from being a backwater power, not really engaged in a lot of international affairs, to exerting a very important place on the world stage.
The sleeping giant is waking up. It was that President Eisenhower who made that statement?
Well, I think that was the commander of the Japanese forces after the attack on Pearl Harbor, but it probably is an apt metaphor for what has happened in China since Nixon went there in the 70s, and and they realized that they needed to get involved in international affairs. And it's incredible what the transformation in China in just that brief span in terms of their economic development, moving hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, building a very incredible economy. But they do have some significant problems. They are still dominated by the one party, the Communist Party. They've got some incredible pollution problems. If you go to China, you walk off the plane in Beijing.
I've read about this. Yes,
it's just phenomenal what the people are dealing with in terms of pollution there, and they are rankling the nerves of their neighbors in East Asia, the South China Sea. They've recently started putting in place an oil rig and a contested piece of property down there, and the Vietnamese and the Filipinos and the Malaysians and others are very concerned about China's pushing them around.
Okay, here's a challenge for you. Can you do Iran, Syria, and Egypt in 4 minutes?
Iran, Syria, and Egypt in 4 minutes. We'll give it a shot.
That's roughly a minute and 10 seconds each.
I'd also throw in there the Middle East peace process. We'll cover that as well. For those who haven't been following the news, we've had a very strong effort under Secretary Kerry for 9 months to try to bring about a breakthrough in the decades-old battle between Israel and Palestine. And
collapsed.
And it has collapsed, so the way ahead is uncertain. There's probably no good outcome in the short term, and the long-term prognosis is not looking very good either. Iran, the P5+1, which is a shorthand for the permanent 5 members at the UN, which are Russia, China, England, France, the United States. The +1 is Germany. They've been involved in negotiations with Iran over their nuclear program, and they're back at the table, and they have until July to hammer out a final agreement, and that could go either way. And of course, there's been a threat over the recent years whether the United States and possibly Israel might strike Iran over their nuclear facilities. Syria, no resolution in sight. Assad continues in power. The killing continues. Over 1 million people are displaced. The situation there is just catastrophic and hard to wrap your mind around.
The sense I get is that he is winning. That there seems to be a sense of acquiescence to his power, that we don't want to put boots on the ground, nobody wants to go in there, and he has the upper hand.
We're reluctant to support a lot of the rebels because some of them are affiliated with Al-Qaeda.
It's a lose situation.
I think the phrase you used was it's complicated, and Syria is more complicated than any place on earth, and now that the Russia-Ukraine thing has happened, it's even more difficult to get Russia on board.
All right, you did it in 3 minutes instead of 4.
Well, left out Egypt.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And we're seeing consolidation of power by probably President al-Sisi, who is General al-Sisi, who seems to be in the mold of President Mubarak. And
people don't realize how much the military is intertwined with their economy there, do they?
Right. Well, and the big story there is the outlawing of the Muslim Brotherhood and the ramifications in the long term of what the counter will be to the government consolidation.
Now, we've got just enough time for a little follow-up here. The collapse of the talks that Secretary Kerry has been undertaking, and I know you probably prefer not yes or no questions, but we don't have much more time than that.
Okay.
But how much of this is to blame on him? Is this a mistake of his? Is this a reflection of his?
The short answer is I think you can respect anyone who tries to solve the Gordian knot of the Middle East peace process. There was some leverage, but you can be worn down by both sides if they are not interested in achieving peace, and that was the case now.
So, no, not his fault?
Not his fault.
Right. Pat Ryan, always a pleasure to talk with you, and really up to the challenge there. You did well. In fact, you beat the 4-minute clock there, and I appreciate you taking the time with us as always. Pat Ryan, the president of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. And again, real quickly, go to 150daysofgiving.com and vote for the Tennessee World Affairs Council so that they can win the grant from the First Tennessee Bank Foundation. Thanks again for stopping in.
Thanks, Dave.